President. Ladies and gentlemen, as a director of historical collections that go back to the 16th century, or when the collections were started, I'm not talking about the legal ownership of the objects, but my point will be a different one. Museums are a kind of cultural memory of a society. They are places of remembrance and astonishment at the variety of possible cultural expressions that result from interactions with the environment and social conditions that the human spirit was and is capable of devising in space and time. Museum collections are the foundations of this encounter with one's own history, but also with the unknown and the new. There are collections of objects from a variety of sources and origins, which have been preserved from deterioration. Because of the authenticity and originality of the objects, those collections are part of the cultural heritage of humanity. One of the central tasks of museums is to preserve the heritage and make it accessible to the public. For example, one of the icons of the Ethnographic Museum in Vienna, the Weltmuseum Wien, is the so-called feather headdress of Moctezuma, which is documented in European collections since 1577. Apparently, neither part of Moctezuma's gifts to Hernando Cortés in 1519, nor a gift from Cortés to Charles V. However, the penacho is a perfect example or a document of the pre-Hispanic culture and society in Mexico, the only surviving example of its kind kept in this European museum. Whereas the legal ownership, the Republic of Austria, has never been questioned so far, sharing heritage for us means also sharing responsibility in conservation issues. And for this reason, for example, 5 or 6 years ago, we have started a binational project together with an Austrian team and a Mexican team, and every single step has been on the same level and under successful agreement of both parties. For me, this is a best practice example of sharing access. In the center of this is the idea that cultural heritage is merely in the administration of museums, but the cultural property of mankind. Based on these premises of legal accessioning, in this sense, shared history is a post-national program on the premises of an according approach by all parties. Shared heritage, therefore, means at all time giving access to the stakeholders, which are the representations of the countries of origin. We must lead the debate in an open, flexible, and honest way. Museums have to accept the process of decolonization by including curators from other countries, thus allowing to bring in new perspectives of interpretation and ownership, cultural ownership. In Vienna, we will be doing this by the new displaying of our new ethnographic museum. For example, in the year of 2000, a network for research transfer called ASEMUS, the Asia-Europe Museum Network, was established, and this is, I think, the new way of sharing cultural heritage. I think also digital access to the collections is vital. Sometimes we should also think that we should let objects travel if this is possible. In single cases, repatriation of provenance or legal access was illegal. In these cases, transparency on collaboration seems to be the key issues. Colonial history is always the history of unequal power, repression, and racism. There are always two coins of the medal. One is the object, and the other is to talk about the consequences of colonializations, also to talk about the victims of colonialization. All our efforts have to serve the aim to find a society of equals, which is determined by the notion of migration in so many forms. If objects are brought onto the market, they have to go back to universal scholarship and interest in other peoples and cultures.
You mostly refer to scholarship and academic assessment to such artifacts. Do you know nothing about also the notion of access from individuals who are not scholars, but perhaps rooted in a particular culture, should also be important in the debate here?
Yes, maybe we can discuss this later on at the end of my input. Alexander von Humboldt noted that we have to understand cultural development in distant parts of the world if we want to understand the world in its entity. European museums have to understand globalization, the history of mankind in historical depth and present. Once more, collaboration, networking, and sharing are the key issues. Only if we detect their stories together, we will be able to understand them, to break up old patterns of thinking. With this anthropological approach, it is no longer a question of embracing the whole world in a classification system that is essentially European. The close tie between the Universal Museum and the Enlightenment represented by Kant are no longer reference points. Now, something becomes universal not because it follows the dictate of human reason, but because it transcends cultural boundaries and is common to all mankind. When humans create works of art to distinguish themselves as a community or as an individual, this creation is full of similarities that reflect the universality of man through the ages and across the seas. In the museum, these hypotheses are formulated and research takes place to test them. Education, I think, is the essence. We, as museums, have the potential to teach tolerance and respect towards other cultures. So I think it's not really the question of legal ownership, but it's the question of sharing cultural heritage. Thank you.